Hello, good afternoon. This is Dr. Dale again. This video is on alphabetic list of problem. What kind of problems associate? I just listed the problems based on the letter from A to Z, and right now we're on letter E. And today I'm going to talk about not a specific disease, but the electrocardiogram. It's a measure of the cardiac electricity. Muscular electricity, cardiac muscular electricity, to detect the abnormal rate or rhythm, or in terms of the voltage, or the wall, or the contractibility, or the intervals. So the EKG is really kind of very useful, especially for several decades ago when the EKG started to use without any other advanced technology such as echocardiogram or the other image studies. So the EKG was the only one at that time, and it was quite efficient actually. So what is the electrocardiogram? How does it work? In order to understand that, we in general we need to understand about the cell. Basically, the cell function is really maintained, even though it's not cardiac, just the body, somatic cells, any cells in the body, has the constantly flowing in or out, influx or exflux of the ions to maintain either resting stage or the excitatory stage, especially the muscle cells, the nerve cells, which these cells has the capacity of the conductivity. So, for example, in the regular muscle cells, the potassium and the sodium always constantly in motion, either potassium coming out or sodium flux in. So this to generate the electricity, and the same idea applied to the cardiac cells. Just depends on where the cardiac cells located. It could be calcium is also could be involved, and this is called active potential or resting potential. So we have the muscles or nerve cells or cardiac muscles have this kind of resting and active potential. So this is to generate the excitement, to trigger the contraction, or to generate the electricity and then conduct to cause the muscle contraction or to conduct or cause the nerve signal. So this is the very basic idea. So that is why the sodium, potassium, and calcium are so important, because these sodium and potassium, they're involved in the electricity of the conductive cells, like the muscle and also the nerve cells. So having said that, in the heart have this kind of sinus, the pacemaker, which is sinus, generated this constantly the potential, regularly active potential and resting potential. Feel it passing down through the atria and through the branch. There's a conductive system to passing down the electricity from the sinus and to the atrium to the junction, which is the atrioventricular junction, and the bundles to the ventricle muscle. So this is the electricity for the heart, and can have the conductive system to passing down. So having said that, the EKG is the record of these electricities. So for example, there's a P wave, QRS, and T wave. They're referring to the depolarization or hyperpolarization. These are the other medical term, which means to cause the cell excitement, causing the contraction, which is depolarization, generate a peak of the potential, and hyperpolarization, which means going back to the resting state. So this up and down, this kind of waving structure, waving of the voltage change generated the contraction and dilate. So this is the for the EKG, like for example, the P wave referring to corresponding to the atrium contraction. Okay, QRS, it's affiliate with the ventricular contraction, and T wave, which means the dilate or the hyperpolarization of the ventricular muscle. And the intervals between P and R, PR interval, is the passing of the electricity from the atrium to the ventricle. So these are the basic idea how this works. So from this EKG, what can we know? First of all, we need to know the rate, whether the heart rate is in normal range from 60 to 100. You can either count them, or there's a special trick for the physician to know it, or the technician can report it. But usually the physician, they know, they just take a glance, they know about the rate, is either 70 or 60 or 50 or 150. And this is about the rate. First of all, when you have the EKG, the physician had EKG in hand, and then see the regularity, whether the intervals between all the waves, it's or between all the complexes, for example, PQRST, whether the P to P or Q to Q or T to T or PQT, the intervals in between any of those, whether it's regular, to indicate the regularity. Okay, so so physician look at the rate and the regularity and the morphology of the waves, whether the wave is too high, whether the wave is too low, or whether the peak is in the wrong position. It's supposed to be a peak up and then became a trough downward. So the peak, instead of pointing up, pointing down. So these are the morphologies and to monitor, so physician can know either there are several leads, like the pectoral lead, which is in front of the chest, and also the limb, the waist, and also the ankle. So these are to indicate where these waves refers to the heart, either the left ventricle, the atrium, left atrium, right atrium, or the septum, or the posterior, or inferior. So these are the idea. It seems it's so simple, just so boring, the same thing, but in the physician's eyes, these are all the information contained in this strip of the EKG. Okay, so like I said, the location, the morphology, the rhythm, and the rate, these are all the included. And also whether there's some emergency situation like the ST segment, whether there's ischemic change, or whether there's some blockage, like either bundle block or the second-degree block, or the first-degree block, or the third-degree block. So these are all the information can tell from that EKG strip, and also can have the emergency signal. For example, if the ST elevation, or if there's a sign for the ischemic, physician look at it or send you to the emergency right away. Or if the heart rate is too low, less than 50, then no doubt the physician will send you to the emergency right away to evaluate completely what's the cause for the bradycardia, what is the cause for the ischemic, or specific, non-specific, or it was ischemic. So then, so these are the very, very fundamental but very useful from the EKG information. Again, like for patients, they just think, what is this, like a magic strip? It is. To physician, it is a magic strip. Really, you can tell so many things from that little narrow piece of paper coming out from the machine. And there's another very useful, nowadays, I think it's very useful, another test for the heart, which is the echocardiogram. This echocardiogram is more than just analyze the cardiac electricity activity. It visualize the movement, the thickness of the wall, the movement of the valve, and also to evaluate whether the ventricles, especially left ventricle, has efficient power to pump the blood, which is cardiac efficient, whether there's efficient for the heart to work. So this is all the technologies. It's so electrocardiogram is very, very useful, and but the fundamental test EKG. So the echocardiogram has indications, and also so is the EKG. But EKG is probably relatively wider. A lot of situations can use EKG first to as a first line to screen, and then do the further tests like an echo or some stress test, for example. So these are the basic information about the EKG. So I'm going to stop here. Anyway, probably you already know it. That's great. But if you don't know, just in case, I'll give you some information about that, the little magic strip of the EKG. Thank you for watching. I will see you next time.